Yeah, apparently we lead spades, but then... Okay. We now... But this is clearly a bluff. Jamming king queen is clearly a bluff. Right? King of spades. Okay! So actually we should have maybe considered bluffing the river with an all-in sizing. Okay, yeah. Alright, chicken song for the Wakko. Welcome back to another Play and Explain, in which I'm going to be playing and explaining. That's why it's called a Play and Explain. I'm going to fire up 2 tables of 500ml Zoom. I like the Zoom format to make videos, as you don't have to bother of tables opening, closing, etc. And you can get quite some hands in and quite some spots in, which is good for the video. Maybe if one day I have 2 similar tables, 3-4 handed, maybe that would also be a good video. So I'll, if that moment comes up, I'll make sure to record it. For now, I think it's fine. Ace Jack with the Ace of Clubs. I might consider check raising, blocking a bit more value. Let's say we had Ace of Spades, Jack of Hearts, and we don't block the A7 suited. I think now it's a fine hand to check raise. We also have the Jack of Spades, so he will have less Jack X that will have backup equity. So, for example, he calls King Jack of Hearts, whereas if I have the Jack of Hearts, he calls King Jack of Spades, having more equity versus my hand. So, I think exactly with those suits, everything is exactly in a way that I would like it to be. To go for a check raise. Go for a 3-bet here versus recreational player. Start off with a small bet. And gonna go for a barrel. Just hoping to fold out a hand like Ace Jack, Ace 10. Good hand like pocket 4s in a tough spot if he has it. And obviously, you have equity. Half pot there, equity that basically almost never has to work. Pocket 5's gonna mix a little bit between, I can think basically of everything, but mainly fold and call. Goose for 8 should be a decent board for me, actually. I'm gonna mix this in a raise. Reroll's quite high, so I'll throw in a raise. And it's basically a denial raise. Plus, I can get called some of the time. But let's say he c-bets a hand like 10 Jack off. If he does it too often, I think we should punish him by raising. And it's not really a board you should do a lot of 1/3 c-betting on. Basically, I don't think I have a fold. Maybe I fold. What is a hand that I call on the button that I would fold to 1/3 on 8 deuce 4? I cannot really think of a hand, so that usually means not really a great strategy. I decided not to barrel. You could make an argument with the 5 of clubs that it's a fine barrel. Let's say I had like 5-4 suited or Ace 4 suited. I think I prefer barreling that. He now blocks the river, which I think is a good play. And I'm just going to fold. I achieved my goal. If he checks, like I said, I sometimes win. He could have Ace King. And I'm blocking the bluffs, mainly Ace 5. That's also the only offsuit hand that he has. Here with Ace 4, you can do a couple of things. I'm gonna go for a check raise. You should not have pocket 3s always, even though there is a recreational here, so I guess he's gonna open it more often. But that does kind of suck. The King 7, I think I'm gonna check again. Actually, I think I'm just gonna rip it in.
I think it's just time to ship it in and go to bed.
And hope he doesn't have a set, basically. And here with the King 7, I think I'm gonna go for a value bet. The only hand that we don't want to see here is 7s. But I think if he has 8s, 9s, 10s, even jacks, he's in a pretty tough spot. Like I said, he timed for quite a long time before calling with 10s. 10s is in quite a tough spot. I mean, we have an open ender. Basically, he ran into sort of best case scenario. So with 10s there, worst case scenario, I just have an overpair and he's dead. To be fair, he did have backup equity to go with his hand. So that made it a little bit more of a call. And I guess he would sometimes think I played jacks this way, 10s this way as well. But basically, he ran into one of the better scenarios, which is basically still flipping. I have an open ender. King 7 here. Could sometimes do something. The recreational here in the small blind. I think I'm here. I'm definitely check raising. And definitely barreling. Squeezing your with aces. Ace-5 I can sometimes open. Roll that one. It's a very good board for me. I'm just going to make a small c-bet. Calls. 7 is quite good. Reduces the amount of combos of 7s. Definitely going to keep on betting. If I had a king, I might consider checking. I think a king is his most likely hand. I don't think he ever rivers an ace. It's very hard for me to show up with a bluff here, so let's try out a 4-bet here. And obviously we have a snap call. And we cooled him big time. This is a good thing of the small bet. I don't think we lose much value from hands that we cooler. So let's say he has a flush or a boat. He's still going to raise versus the 10%. Like, I was considering 20 or 30, but then I think a flush might just call. But versus 10%, I think it's very hard to just call with a flush in a spot where I'm going to have ace-king very often, ace-queen. And obviously, I mean, he got very unlucky. Let's say, for example, we had pocket kings there. It's a different story, because then I think he's rivering. He's rivering way more hands. So if we have pocket kings, he can sometimes river the ace-x of clubs. So then suddenly we could consider betting bigger, because ace-x of clubs is not going to raise versus my 10%. This hand could spot to go for a bluff. Bad hand though. And the pocket nines, we're just going to go for a step. Just close. I'm gonna actually go for a block here again. He tank for a very long time with 9-10 and called. That means that he recognized the board as basically an amazing run out for me. That's why I decided to bluff a hand that's as bad as a hand to bluff with as my hand, basically. I think I did make a mistake, though. I think on the river, we will definitely still have some 3/4 bets, and I think my hand should have just went in at 3/4. Let's say we had... So, it's a very interesting spot. In general, when you have a split betting range, so there we could have maybe half pot, 3/4-ish. So let's say 66% and a jam. Your jam will still be reserved for hands that block a straight. It's not because I think he can have a straight all that often. Even though you could say king, queen. Close. I guess he could have king, queen some of the time. Okay, actually, if he can have king, queen some of the time. Yeah, actually, I think I maybe overvalued the board a little bit. Let's say the river was jack 9, a king. Then I think we definitely have a license to jam. But to come back to my story, you still want to block the... I'm gonna bet this some of the time. The board I'm gonna mix on got quite high, so I go for the bet with pocket 5s. Queen 10. The spot I'm going to split. I think this one goes in a block. So yeah, to go back to my story, you still want to block the straight because his hero calls are going to be hands that block a straight. Okay, so even though it might be a spot, let's say for argument's sake that he cannot have a straight, we still want to block the straight because then we block the hero call. So hand like queen 9, for example, would be a good hero call. Basically, the reason why he tanked with 2 pair is because he perceived my shove to be... So the reason why he fought so long with 2 pair, which is an absolute strong hand, is because he perceived my jam to be, I guess, stronger 2 pair plus. He perceived my range to be stronger 2 pair plus. And that's why he tanks. So basically, he has a bluff catcher, which is not blocking much of my value range, which is not completely true. Let me see. He rivered. Actually, his turn call is a bit optimistic, I would say. The 9-10. Basically, for the reason that he tanked the turn. That is the reason why he tanked on the river. That's the reason why his turn call is quite optimistic. This hand can go either way. But this time, I would sometimes call this. I know there's a lot of people who don't really want to call, but I think fine hand to call with. And now, when the 8 rivers, I do think we should bet. Because he can now sometimes have rivers and 8. Let's say the river was a deuce or something, I would probably check. So yeah, great example. We had 10-8. So let's say the river is actually a deuce. So let's say the river is a 3 in that spot. Completing hands for me. Then one, I have less bluffs, and he has less hands to call with. And then, for example, I would check because we have the jack as well, right? The jack is a primary hand that he plays bet, check, call. So then I would check that hand again. And then he would bluff 10-8. But now 8 is a pair, so I decided to bet. I think I'm gonna bet a small sizing here if he has a low. We're blocking like some of the low flushes. The pocket 5s, pocket 7s, 5, 6. Mainly pocket 5s and pocket 7s, I would say. This is a spot I'm going to mix between 3/4 and 1/3, but mainly 3/4 and a two-tone. Not a lot of 1/3 betting. Got the pocket 4s. Definitely barreling here. It's a straight and a flush complete. I think I'm not gonna bet too big. Say half pot's actually already pushing. I'm in doubt. I'll go for 40. When you're in doubt between 30 and 50, bet 40. That's my advice. But yeah, as you see, he's going to have a lot of hands that have a tough time defending versus that sizing. Because of how connected the board was. So hard for me to have shitty hands. We face a delay. Don't have a heart in my hand. Too thick, I'm still going to peel. If he checks the river, I think I'm just going to check and lose. Because let's say, for example, he late c-bet 10-9 with a heart. Yeah, he's obviously going to fire that through on the king. So I think then if he checks, he probably has an ace, a king. Or at least something that's unlike default. I will sometimes 3-bet, sometimes call, sometimes whatever. Sometimes fold. King high board's very good for our range. But with the c-bet. Could also check back this hand because it's very shit. But yeah, at the same time, there's not a lot of reason to have a lot of checkbacks on this board. But I guess this would probably be the first candidate. Queen 8 is better because I could now barrel. Queen 10 is better. Spades in general are okay, but the 9 really sucks. Or check. Gonna move the 10 to bet, check, bet. Here, I think I'm going to check and let him do something funky on the river. Checks. I think having a queen is quite good because we block the ace queen. Here he checks. I think we're going to check as well. Decent board from my ranges, I would say. Can have 5s, can have 4s. Suited aces. Definitely overbetting the turn. Can have 5, 6 suited, 5, 4 suited. But I don't think that that's really hands that people would always put me on. Can even go a little bit smaller than this. This river is very good for me. So I do. I have an ace. I have a 10. Don't have hearts. Debating a check call. Given my exact hand. So I'm gonna. Let's have pocket 5s, so I would definitely bet again. Let's say I had for some reason ace queen. I might decide to bet, but I think this hand functions fine as a check call. So yeah, you had queen 8 of spades. You could also have queen 8 of hearts. And then we're quite happy. This hand I will a low frequency call. We're a little bit deeper, and the deeper we get, the more I like calling. I don't think we should bet this. This is This is a spot that I think sometimes people get wrong, where they say that they want to bet for protection against a flush draw. And as my good friend Bill Lewinsky, aka Euros Rice, once explained me, you cannot protect against a flush draw. You can value bet against a flush draw. You can only protect against hands that fall to a bet. So let's say if I bet the turn, I bet for protection against Jack 10 offsuit from Rum Party here. Okay. But I bet for value against flush draws. So I would much more likely bet this hand on a rainbow board than on a two-tone board, on a double two-tone board. Hope that makes sense. Because you cannot get a flush draw to fold. So then basically what happens on the turn if you bet on a board that has two flush draws, there's more hands that call you that have quite a lot of equity. Also, I would still have to dodge a paired board. I'm against two ranges that can have basically anything. I would sometimes 3-bet, sometimes call this. Didn't roll low enough to do something here. We do have a club in our hand, but I think check. But the ace of clubs, I'd bet. For some future benefit purposes. Here I'm going to do a bit of everything. Call this time. Check. And I'm going to check the river. Hope we win versus a7. I was gonna say, hope we win versus a7. And what do? We win versus a7. Here I play the board, which is usually not great. Gonna go for let's see bet. We do have a good hand in terms of blocking jacks and tens. But I think, especially if he c-bets king 4 deuce a little bit too often, my bet on the river there is printing. Just, I have air, he has air. Just air versus air, I think we already are printing. It doesn't, he can still hero calls with quite some ace highs and stuff. His hand, mainly 3-betting. 4 bets. Below. Down. Sometimes c-bet, sometimes check. I think this hand can literally do a bit of everything. This board is also a board where you can do check, you can use big sizings, you can use a couple of small sizings. It's all fine. And I cannot really bet the turn. He's on a flush completing turn. First of all, obviously, he will now have made some hands that have me completely crushed. Also, a lot of the hands that he's going to continue with now have some backup equity. So my equity when called barreling on a 3 of hearts turn is going to be lower than, for example, on a 3 of clubs turn. Because let's say he has ace 8, okay? And a 3 of clubs turn, he's basically just always calling any ace 8, and we do very well. But now that the flush completes, he might fold his ace 8 without a heart and only call with a heart. Meaning that the continuing rates of villain is going to have more equity. Meaning that the EV of my, in this case, thinner value bet is going to go down. So then checking becomes more attractive. This one's close, the ace-9. There's 2.5, I would have probably just folded. If it's a recreational calling, I would have obviously called as well. You can sometimes start bluffing this. I think it's an okay hand to bluff. That's a bad river. I don't want to, but I have to. Alright, with the ace-9. Probably calling the turn. We unblock lower pairs. We unblock broadways. So yeah, I think ace-9. We block the suited versions. He checks back. That's interesting. I would have definitely called there versus the barrel. And now I hope to get called by a hand like pocket sixes. And he called me with pocket sevens. This guy is in a snappy mood. I think he was the same guy with the ace-8. I'm going to sometimes jam, sometimes call. Go for the call this time. We flop completely nothing. And I'm going to check fold. Maybe if I had a backdoor, I would check raise. I think that's a fine play. On a queen high board. Because a queen high board is actually quite good for me. Let's say I was in the small blind and he would have seen with the board. Maybe I would have even check raised ace-5. That's ace-5 diamond. That probably goes a bit too far. But the queen high board, if we're playing small versus button, the queen high board is very good for me. Now it's a little bit less good for me, as button versus big blind, you're more inclined to 4-bet a hand like ace queen off, king queen off. Whereas versus the small blind, small versus button, those hands make fine calls. And that's mainly because the small blind 3-bet's a bit more linear. This hand's quite close. What is 50-50? And it's mainly because the small blind range contains more hands that we have dominated, and the big blind contains more hands that are suited. So let's say he has 10-8 suited, and we have ace queen off. We don't, obviously, no. We don't mind that hand. Obviously, we have 10-8 suited beat, right? But, for example, a small blind 3-bets ace-jack off 100%. Okay? And from the big blind, that's not 100% 3-bet. So we much rather call versus a range that has more ace-jack off, more king-queen off. And we will much rather 4-bet ace-queen off versus a range that has more suited stuff. Right? Deny equity. So then the queen 6-4 is actually still an okay board for the button if he 4-bets against the big blind. However, if he 4-bets versus the small blind, we have more queen x. That's 1. We have more 6s and 4s. That's 2. And his 4-bet range contains less queen x because he's not going to 4-bet ace queen off. He's not going to always 4-bet king queen off. That's why actually that spot should not get c-bet that often. Check over with the ace-8. Turn is quite dicey whether we should call or not. Yes, we're sometimes ahead, but in order to realize being ahead, he has to give up with king jack, jack queen, jack 7, jack 8, queen 8. Naming all these hands. I am tempted to still call. but it's a bit... Do you want to make 2022 your greatest poker year ever? Now, I've done a webinar on how to do that in our academy, which we have made available completely for free. So go over to pokerambition.com and let me help you achieve your goals. Pocket segments, easy call. We'll sometimes 4-bet this. Let's do it this time. Did you roll high? No, we didn't roll high, but you know, sometimes you just gotta feel like it. It's the YouTube RNG.
Feel the power. You feel my power, baby? Feel my power.
Sevens. Okay, this can get dicey, unimproved. We didn't improve. On the turn, 8s and 9s. Definitely your primary candidates. Okay, he checks. I think we just have a license to bet small now with range. Yeah, pocket 6s. I'm gonna call her with queen 10 because this guy is in here. Interesting board. I'm going to lead. To basically get the money in versus this guy and to deny some equity. I think the turn is a check. And the board gets so connected and drawy. Again, it's similar to an earlier spot. I think we had 4s, right? I would much rather bet the turn on a 5 of clubs than on a 7 of diamonds. If you think the opposite, you're understanding the spot wrong. Again, you're betting because the board becomes scary. You want protection, but that's not possible. Okay, he just has quite a lot of higher equity hands now, and that just means you have to slow down a little bit. Whereas on a 5, he doesn't have them. A 6 can literally go either way. You can do whatever you want here. What do I want? He bets again. Main bluffs are gonna be containing a queen. That really sucks. King, queen, jack, queen, king, jack. But then again, those are quite a lot of combos that I'm just naming. I think I'll call this 50-50. Let's go. Better hand. Him. A6, I'm going to be check calling. I'm going to definitely check call the turn. With a draw to a very good straight. This is interesting. I think we have to try to get value from a 9. Unless you think it's a spot where... This is interesting. This is a spot that I would sometimes check. But solver does not agree with me. But I understand why I want to check, and I understand why solver doesn't want to bet. Obviously, you know, just want to... Especially when you're in position, you don't want to waste one street to be able to get money in versus a range that flushes an ace. Let's say he has a good flush and he wants to check raise the turn and I don't bet the turn. Yeah, that's going to cost me quite some money. Going to split the turn here. I think between a block and a pot. Could also go, I think I'm doubting a bit between 125 and pot. Then you should have bet 107 again. No, 100, how much? 111, 112, 112 and a half. He raises. That's interesting. Decide to lead the river. Funky play. Let's take a look at that spot after the session. Check call here with the queen 9. Not a great turn. What? I said that's not a great turn, but we improved the top pair. This is actually a very good turn. And depending on the... Actually, we have a very good hand here. Here we get a check jam, easy call. And he's pretty dead. Actually gonna go for the check here. With the queen 9. And we have an easy call on the river. Okay, at ace 4. Wait, we chopped? Are you kidding me?
So unfucking fair, man. Play like a fucking genius to get down here every fucking day. I think I'm gonna burn this fucking place down if I don't win this fucking tournament.
Yeah, I should have probably barreled that 10 jack and reserved my checks for queen 10, ace, king 10. I was considering a barrel. I don't think that was played very well. I mean, obviously, jack 10, you know, it has more equity because we have the gutter to go with it. It needs more protection versus ace, king, ace, queen, as we just saw. Pocket 3s. Is still a call? I think so. Bit dicey though. Just at ace 8. We bet the ace and suited. We get deeper. You want to include a bit more calling, but definitely do that more with offsuit hands and hands that don't make the nuts. Obviously, ace 10. You flop a flush draw, you're gonna make the nuts. So you can definitely continue be aggressive with your suited aces. But a hand like ace jack off, king queen off there, I would move to my flat call. Sure. And even ace queen off. When we become 200 big blinds deep. Or at least ace queen off, not always. Maybe 50-50. Because you also don't want to lower your 3-bet that much that he can just open relentless. Ace suited is a hand I'm going to call because we become very deep. So making flush over flush is worth more money. This one I'm going to open this time. So let's go. Backdoor flush. 7-8 of diamonds versus my ace-9 of diamonds to make my point. Turn is interesting. Okay, he did not bite. Does he have? Probably a queen. Snap caught me on the river, so then he probably had an ace. Yeah, ace 10. Yeah, versus ace 10. We should have check raised. Should we have check? Go for a check raise here. With some backdoors. Check 7-8. Dilemmas. I think I'm gonna go for a bet. Yeah, raise it. I think just calling is the way to go. Actually gonna make a small bet here on the river. And I'm going to make a bet here, I think. Just to make him full pocket sixes. Pocket fives. This is, for example, this is spot 9 7. I see some people stab them a bit too much with lower pairs. So then I think not checking back ace jack and going for the bluff, I think comes a little bit better. Unless you think that they now stab and then call the river. Then that would be pretty fucked up. King f5. Decent board for me. Decent board. If you treat it from the small blind, as soon as the two broadways connect, then yeah, you can just do quite some betting. This one's really close. I'm gonna go for a bet. These boards you can do whatever you want. Raise a raise, which I did sort of take in consideration. But that's fine. We can easily call at least one. He immediately overbets the turn. Gonna fold this hand. That is obviously the downside of betting. But unless you think he's doing that with pure airballs. then I think we should just fold. Can bet. I think this board you can bet 1/3. You can bet over bet. I see merits in both actually here. I'm definitely gonna go for an over bet. I'm going to sit there. This is a good river in terms of it improves Jack 9, but he never has Jack 9. I do still think he has some hands that he could now call me with, mainly Queen Jack. Queen Jack has now become quite attractive. But I think they're actually aces without the ace of diamonds could actually just backpick on the flop. Ace 3, if I had a heart, I might barrel, but with a heart, it's fine. Check 7. Check 7. 10-7. Actually, I don't mind check raising 10-7 some of the time. Let's just go do that. I'm gonna check the ace 3, hope to win versus king queen. The good thing with the jack 7 is we block value, and basically on 6 and 8 and 9, a king and a jack, our hand also improves and we have good blockers. So I think it's a fine hand to sometimes put in your check rating range. Because of, like, we have so many cards that we can barrel on. Diamond, straight complete, the 7. I think it's like half the deck. Easy c-bet here at 9s, probably going to barrel as the turn is a high card. Maybe I would still barrel actually on a 10. I think a 10 I would probably still barrel. Jack. This card I would definitely barrel. I'll probably split here on the turn. I like a small bet. Ace 5. What do we do with ace 5? We're gonna rhythm going to check. I think I sometimes actually still win. This is king jack, king 10, as the guys are recreational. Let's chop first a7. Like, that's the benefit of betting the turn there versus recreational. That we can sometimes bluff some rivers. And we actually still have some EV in the check back line. Value of 91, clearly a recreational player. He 3-bets me very small. Or you're maybe recreational watching. The reason why you shouldn't be 3-betting small is because basically you just let me in. Okay? You let me realize my equity. Even if you have a great hand, okay, you don't want to 3-bet small. You want to charge me. Because I'm not going to realize with king 4. I'm only going to get my money in when I have your aces beat. Okay. Bet flop here with queens. Queens would sometimes raise pre-flop, sometimes call. He barrels. I think we should just fold. I think, yeah, whatever. Actually gonna mix in a call here because the big blind's also recreational. So let's play a pot with all the recreationals together. Going to mix 4-bet and call here. Call the call. And going to fold. Can also just 3-bet this hand. That's perfectly fine, but you don't really want to face a 4-bet. And then if there's a recreational on the big blind, I think calling. Perfectly fine option. I'm going to check call here with the ace-10. Turn is quite dicey. Next, we have a 10. So I think having a 10, I would prefer just betting the river. Here I'm going to check raise small. 8-5. If you raise the river, he is... and I think on the turn, we should be blocking. With our 8-5. And we get a fold. Or with the ace-10. Easy c-bet and barrel. With the ace-queen. Until we turn the queen. I think we check on a queen. I don't think we have to be too concerned. The 6. I'm just gonna block the river. Here with ace-10. We got called by ace-king. Gonna bet a bit bigger versus the recreational. I think king jack there is like your must big bet. With ace king, you could make an argument for betting small and letting him call with his ace highs. I will sometimes call, sometimes fold, sometimes do everything. Or call this time. Actually, not everything. And the same now versus the squeeze. I will... Oh, I think 50-50. 57. Okay. Let's flip a set.
The last tip I have for you is on small pocket pairs. And these are hands that you can win monster pots. So when you get dealt a pocket pair, try to flop a set. Play it smooth and win all the money.
Okay, board for my range. First half pot, I think we have easy fold. Queen 10, easy call. And easy fold. G3 bet here. The ace 5 suited. And now for the GTO kids, let's rip it in if he 4 bets. Shall we do it? Just to, you know, to satisfy the GTO crowd. Yeah, okay, we're gonna satisfy the GTO crowd. Why not? Let's satisfy the GTO crowd. He folds. GTO is the way to go.
Fuck GTO. GTO has got to go. Say no to GTO, kids.
King 7. Sometimes call, sometimes 3 bet. I think it's an okay candidate to stab. Even over to a queen. Back to flush draw, back to straight draw. Oh, stabby. Go for a stabski. You should be check folding some hands on this board. As the 3 and the 4 connect decent with the big blind's calling range. And the board is two-tone. So our bet should have some activity there. Ace 5. My hand was ace 4. Like the lower your ace becomes, obviously if I have a backdoor, I think my ace is fine. That I think here actually I am all delay. Could also check. To prevent this from happening, basically. We still think we have a call. And I'm going to call the river. Depending on sizing. Here the 10 jack. First overbet, that kind of sucks. Especially because we have a 10. I still go to call. And I think I'm going to call. Mainly because we are quite capped. And I was going to say he's going to have quite some hands in that region. It's quite tempting to use too much of these hands, basically, like the 7-8, the 8-9, the 9-10.
Because I'm operating on the assumption that he's very polarized in that spot, which combinatorically narrows his value range a ton and could create a bluffing imbalance if he's not very careful.
It's for example, that hand is played GTO, okay? The actual hand. But how GTO he is depends on the frequency that he's doing that with. And I would say from my experience that this is not a spot where it's easy to... It's not a spot where it's hard to overbluff, basically. Eight for 4, it's a very good board for him. In terms of a huge 4x advantage. Also, the 5-6 and the 6-7 off that I don't have. We're definitely going to do a lot of checking. Good value bet. Yeah, fuck. No, should have bet. The bet check. The bet check. Obviously, because if he now rivers Queen Jack, for example, if the river is a queen and he has Queen Jack, he obviously has me beat. 3-pair doesn't exist, Wakko. Oh. Gonna do some low frequency big betting here on this board. I think this is actually quite a good candidate. Now the problem here is that we definitely don't want to get check raised. But then again, like for example, if I had 10 Jack of Hearts, I would not bet. But now we do block the straight. I'm gonna go for it. But if he check raises, I'm not happy. We do block a hand that he could check raise with. King Jack. King Queen. Yeah, this. Also, if I had the heart, if I had the club version, I would definitely also not bet. But now I figured, he would sometimes have clubs himself. Yeah, now it really sucks. Ugh. Yeah, Wakko, you should have thought about that before you bet it. If we ever have the best hand, let's say he has 4 8 of clubs. Jack 8 of clubs. Jack 7 of clubs. 10 7 of clubs. I guess we do sometimes have the best hand. Yeah, this can be very uncommon. You can actually also sometimes have me beat. Interesting spot. I didn't pay any attention actually to this hand, but that seems to be... Yeah. Chop it up. Get lucky. I'm curious if if my reasoning was still right to bet that hand. Like I said, you don't want to have clubs. And you do want to block at least the straight. I would say Queen 7 of Hearts is probably your primary hand that you can still bet. And then if we bet, do we bet fold? It's so close. Even if we haven't beat, let's say he has 10 8 of clubs, that still has a lot of equity. I don't think we're gonna make it. We needed around 35%. I had to close a gap of 10% in my head. And that 10% would then be hands that we have beat, which are gonna be draws, but yeah. Interesting river. think we're gonna do quite some leading here. He called me with 2 pair. I'm curious though for my sizing. I went 10%, but we do have a nut flush here. Like, it's easy to think with the nut flush, you know, that we want to get more money. Actually, I think the nut flush wants to check raise, doesn't want to lead. When I was check calling the turn, I already had in mind that I could lead some rivers. And then this river came and I led. But I don't think this is the lead. This is just always a check raise. So the first hand I wanted to take a look at was the ace deuce of hearts. I already said quite a high checking frequency. The 9-8 does also connect with our range. Let's say it's 8-7-5. You would just check range, but we did go for check. Then check, check if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Turn is the queen of diamonds. We have ace deuce of hearts. I don't think we get to fold a lot of better ace X with a bet, so that's why I checked. Okay, he just wants to bet. I do not necessarily agree. Yes, we can fold out ace 4, ace 5. But that is about it. And they don't even count because, yeah, okay, it's chop equity. I'm actually not a big fan. Then we get raised. So I actually don't like that. I prefer way more check calling. Maybe dunking some rivers. As I mentioned, that was definitely something that I had in my mind. He bets half pot. Yes. Go. A river is the jack of spade. Jack of hearts, sorry. I assume we're going to do quite some dunking. Very little dunking, actually. And actually, ace deuce of hearts, if we did have it, it actually always wants to dunk. That's quite interesting. Wants to bet 21%. In position should probably still raise some 10x. Any 10x. And then we can come over the top. Okay, yeah. If he's still raising 10x, then I think dunking is fine. Because then we can get over the top. And he should raise 10x. I'm really surprised though that we don't dunk more. I'm really surprised. I don't really understand why we don't want to build a bigger leading range here on the river. I guess that means that he's gonna bluff them with a jack. We check to him. Nope. Okay. Comment down below if you understand why we don't have more of a leading range here on the river. Because I don't get it. But anyway, he is going to, for example, he had 9-6, is a hand that he's going to check behind. So we did at least one big blind of that hand. In the sim, it's dunk betting 21% if it did dunk bet. So I think then the dunk bet re-raise is going to be fine just because of the fact he's just going to check back way too much hands, in my opinion. For example, he's betting, what's his worst value bet? 2 pair. So he's still betting queen jack. Yeah, I think people can be quite nitty on this spot. So I like donking. You see, you don't have to always agree with the solver.
Fuck GTO.
Even though the danger in this case is I don't really understand why we're not doing it. Right? If I understand why we're not doing it, and then I still don't want to do it, that's something else. Moving on to the next hand, the jack 7, where we started with a big bet on the flop. We can actually see that the biggest bet that's being used is like around half pot, 3/4. Very little overbetting. Very little overbetting. I did felt jack 7 was a fine candidate to bet a little bit bigger. We do say that of all the jack 7s, that is kind of the... Yeah, and I had king queen in my mind as well as a big bet. A hand that clearly wants to bet on the larger size. But like I said, I remember me saying unfrequent pot to bet big, but I like this hand for it. So we did go actually for the big bet. Didn't called. And turn was a 9. See what we now do. Jack 7 of hearts. No, it's quite a high frequency check. I did say, for example, that queen jack or queen 10 of clubs would be the worst. Yes, these hands definitely not bad. And then queen 8 of heart was the best. Apparently, again, clubs do check more than hearts. That's kind of what I expected. But apparently we just have too much equity to bet the turn with. I actually thought he should now just jam king queen, or at least, yeah, actually I thought that was probably a play that was going to happen, but apparently not. Maybe against a range that bets a bit more jack 7 of hearts, like I did in this example. Actually, also if we bet, we actually bet at a smaller sizing. The 3/4 is going to be more dominant, and we bet if we have a pair to go with our hand, so like some showdown value. Naked flush draw, but not combo draw. He jams. What do we do with jack 7? We have a fold. Okay. But we're quite in the as played line, right? This line doesn't really shouldn't really exist that much in theory. Let's say the more common line was the 3/4, and the turn was the 9. Check. Then we're already more likely to bet jack 7. Because obviously we get check shipped on less due to the SPR. And the main reason why we lean towards betting more air instead of equity is because of that jam, right? That folding now with our draw is really horrible. Yeah, I just took the wrong sizing. I think I just took the wrong sizing. So now let's look at the king 7-8, small versus big blind, where we had the king queen. We decided to bet small. King queen, which king queen definitely, of all the hands, you see a decent preference for betting. On the turn I was doubting between 125 and pot, and then I said I should go somewhere in the middle. 125 is indeed the preferred sizing, so slightly misplayed that, but you do see like there's also some 3/4 involved. Actually, with the exactly my king of spades hand, you see more 3/4, but I'm not gonna be too picky here, so I think it's fine that we did go for the bet. Actually, to get the raise, I think the 20, yeah, I think this one then makes more sense. Let's take that line. He then raised. What are hands that he should be considering small raise with? Actually, you should never small raise. So what he did is not really a thing. But I was thinking that maybe he would sometimes raise. It felt like a bit of in the past, okay? But this is for the old school players. They talked about a freeze play. And a freeze play is when you raise the turn to check behind the river. That's kind of how this line felt like to me. Like I said, it's not really a thing. Versus a bigger sizing. Could sometimes raise small. Yeah, here, like a 4-3 and a 5-3. So sometimes the bottom pair. 7-4 of spades. 7-4 of hearts, for example, indeed is a hand that cannot really call. So it then sometimes raises. And that's kind of what I putted him on. But let's see. Okay, so let's see. He raises small. We're not folding king queen, obviously. A river is actually a 4 of spades. That's interesting. Let's say the river is a blank. I would have led here for small sizing. Aces wants to lead here for small sizing. 6-5. 5-4 of spades. Okay, funky. King queen, never. Now 4 of spades, actually king queen does sometimes want to lead, but it's the flush. So no, I'm inventing things that apparently, in theory at least, didn't exist. But like I said, I put it in a bit more on a hand which didn't really want to call, but also didn't really want to fold. That's kind of how this race on the turn felt like.
All right, well, if you had a read, okay, I changed my mind. If he had a read, it's good. That's how reads work, right? It's just, okay, fine. Everything's forgivable if you have a fucking read.
We can see, though, that, for example, a hand like 7-8 wants to draw a little blocky. I think that that actually makes some sense. Prevent certain hands. For example, to prevent a hand like from King Jack checking behind. We check. And I'm playing around with these kind of plays a little bit. So in the phase of playing around, you're going to make some mistakes. You know, sometimes you nailed it, and sometimes you're just completely off. And basically, it's important to just keep on marking these hands, reviewing them, and try to learn from them. Okay. And he actually just called with king 3, which I would say is a fine play. Yeah, he just calls with king 3. I also thought that on the turn versus this sizing, you know, we should still do quite some calling. Let's say we have 9-10. And I don't just want to check behind 9-10. Yeah, you can actually see that here, that 9-10. Oh, let's go back. Call. 4 spades. And you can actually see that indeed 9-10 is now indeed a hand that calls the turn and then bluffs river. So it is important to develop some sort of a leading range here on the river. I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, apparently we lead spades, but then... Okay. We now... But this is clearly a bluff. Jamming king queen is clearly a bluff. Right? King of spades. Okay! So actually we should have maybe considered bluffing the river with an all-in sizing. To be fair, he's in quite a tough spot with the king of spades. Okay. Okay, yeah. Would have been an option. All right, chicken song for the Wakko. So I hope you guys like this video. I think at the end, this analysis, let me know what you guys think of it. But I think this is how your session should look like. Before you go play, you should have a certain intention for your session. I'm a big fan of that. You should have certain improvement points that you're trying to work on. I always ask myself the question, how can this session bring me closer to my goals? Okay. And out of that then come a couple of focus points that I think I should focus on and improve upon during this session. Spots that come up are an opportunity to become a better player and therefore your goals. Then while playing, obviously, you should be on the lookout for that. And you should be curious and mark spots where you're like, hey, I'm not really sure what to do. Or, hey, I'm curious what my range wants to do. Or, hey, I'm curious what kind of sizes are being used here. Or in my case, hey, I'm curious if we can dunk bet the river here. Okay? Then you mark these hands and afterwards you consult the solver. And then sometimes when I find a spot that, for example, that spot where we didn't dunk the river on where we had the nut flush on the 10, not really sure why we're not dunking. That's a spot that I would then mark and we discuss with other players what they think of the situation. Okay, that's I think how a good process to improve looks like if you are a professional poker player, or even not even a professional in general, if you're a poker player who's trying to improve and trying to take it serious. If you like this video, guys, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like this video, give it a thumbs down. Any comments, any plays that I made where you're like, hey, Mr. Wakko, slow down a second. Tell me what the fuck is going on here. Comment down below. Any questions, any criticism, you know, I love the chat pros, as they used to call it on Twitch, but in this case, the comment pros, because if you guys make a good comment, be critical, then I can look at it and I see that as an opportunity to improve my game as well. Thank you all for tuning in. Good luck at the tables.